Well, this is a Q&A session, and the questions have been fielded through our website, ukcff.com. And over the past few months, we've received questions for various members of the panel here. And it's just to give the listener and the viewer an idea of what is going on in the Christian production world. And that's every aspect of the process of producing a film or a short or a documentary or a children's program, any kind of program. And we have a representative of every stage of the process here. There's Stephen Baldwin, who is a well-known actor, celebrity actor from, and is known as a Hollywood insider and a Hollywood outsider, I suppose, as well. And has a particular vision to impact the world through Christian film. So in the last few years, you've devoted most of your time, if not all your time, specifically to Christian film. Is that correct? And Andrew Walkington is a producer-director. Andrew is sitting next to Stephen. And Andrew's just produced his first full-length feature, which won the Best of British category in the UK Christian Film Festival last year. And he is well known for producing, directing a feature film on a budget, which is a particular British concern. Next to Andrew is Tom Conigliaro, and Tom is an executive producer and has been involved in putting the financing package together for many movies, particularly Loving the Bad Man, which is starring Stephen Baldwin as well, and that will be out in the UK in September the 1st. Will be released through churches and in selected cinemas, and also later on DVD. And next to Tom is Luke Walton. Luke is famous for The Pitch and has executive produced those entries as well. Have you been involved in other programs apart from The Pitch, Luke?
No, I've produced 6 or 7 shorts, but I haven't done any features yet. So.
Right, great. So maybe you could
yes,
talk afterwards. That's right.
Tom's my mate.
That's right.
It's good. I'm liking Tom already.
Your new mate. That's right. That's right. Your new best friend.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you're American. Yeah, both.
And the microphone.
Yeah.
Pass the microphone.
Sure. And on the end there, but by no means least, is Paul Kerensa, who is a stand-up comedian, but also what many people don't know about him yet is that he's one of the country's leading comedy writers and has written for the Miranda series for the BBC, amongst many others. And as we go around, all these people will fill you in on some of the details of the projects that they've been involved in. The first question is for Stephen. Stephen, you're now travelling the world, working on different projects in different countries. Unfortunately, you haven't been involved in a British production yet, but certainly you've been involved in American productions, and I believe you've just been involved in a production in Italy, and just about to be starring in films in India and also Poland. What are the main cultural differences you noticed leaving the Hollywood circle and coming and producing and acting overseas?
Well, actually what's weird is the movie in Rome was not a Christian film, and I hadn't been involved in a full-blown secular opportunity in quite a long time, but it was with some pretty cool actors, Rutger Hauer and Michael Madsen and some fun people, and it was a sci-fi thing. Just to clarify that, it's called Sights of Death. It's S-O-D, Sights of Death. It's just a kind of obvious, gratuitous sci-fi entertainment picture. That I've been having fun with some of these dynamics because I get those kinds of offers, but I say, because of my personal choice now, some elements of the storyline would have to be removed in order for me to participate, which in this case, it was the first time in a long time that actually the producers were willing to do that. So I thought that was kind of unique and different. Yeah, I think that for all the different places I'm going to now, which also include the Philippines in a couple of weeks, and it's really weird. I was just talking to somebody about half an hour ago a pastor who's just across the road here, and I was telling him I just have no idea what God's doing right now, because I would assume that probably normally I would have some kind of structured corporate thing, and just I'm bouncing all over the place. And I would say that the difference between all these places geographically is that with the Christian film industry being where it is now, which is, I think, fair to say, in the early stages, it's kind of interesting to see how in these different regions everybody's still just trying to figure it out. Technology plays a huge role in all that, and I hope this doesn't sound too presumptuous, but Tom and I, as Americans, are quite used to, you can go to any one of the colleges in America that's a film school, and they have 25 red cameras. It's just crazy what's available to you in that respect. But I think what's more fascinating than going to these different regions and engaging Christian filmmakers and leaders about the vision and the passion and the hope for creating Christian film, I think what's more interesting is the connectivity that comes with the faith and the interaction that comes with the faith. I think that network, for me personally, that network is, if not more important, equally as important as the mechanics that goes into the process of making films, et cetera, et cetera. Because I know in the next 5, 10, 15 years to come, I look forward to opportunities that you and I will have, Ray, as a result of our time here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm pretty thrilled to just be in the dynamic, because for me it's not only just about the movies, it's about the ministry and the stuff that goes on behind the scenes as well.
Right. Great. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks very much. The next question is for you, Luke. You've brought various British filmmakers to Hollywood, introduced them to Hollywood. What do you see as the main cultural differences for filmmakers? For British filmmakers going to Hollywood, and also possibly creating a base to welcome Hollywood to the UK as well?
Well, they are only short films, but so people we go and connect with, people like Ralph Winter and Gavin Scott. Some of them are Christians. Ralph's a very strong Christian. He's been well. I'm sure these guys know him. And Gavin not, but wrote The Borrowers, Small Soldiers, Young Indiana Jones. So he's got plenty of track record. I think what's interesting, though he's British actually, oddly enough, his wife's Kiwi producer, but he's Brit. I think that there are moments when we're two nations that are separated by a common language, and faith is one of those areas where there is a different dynamic in both places. That's absolutely true. So you can release. There is a market for a specifically Christian film, if I understand that. What that is exactly, but that is a film that would have a primarily an audience that would be interested in it would be Christians. There's a massive market in the States, just sheer numbers, whereas the market here just isn't in the same way and isn't focused in one place where you can sell it in the same way. And I think there's a tonality of what you say is also a different thing. So one of the conversations I think I've been having with people in the industry in LA for a long time is about crossover, and what they've been talking about with movies is a Christian film that crosses into a secular audience, whereas I don't think we would understand that same conversation here in the same way from the get-go. I think we would just make a movie for an audience, so we would just be making it for a general audience in the first place. I don't think we'd necessarily set out to make it primarily for a Christian audience. At least we don't, because I'm not inviting only Christians to pitch. I mean, I hope Christians do want to. I'm inviting people to pitch stories based on Bible stories, and the Bible is Christians' book. But I equally get invitation. I get Jewish people who want to pitch to us. I get Muslims who want to pitch stories around Abraham, at least they can get in on the story at the beginning. It's a narrow window there, but
Like the Bible too.
yes, exactly. So they got sort of stuff to go at, and then we one of our top 10 this year was a Marxist, so absolutely no religion getting a look in there. But he was interested in the Book of Esther. Interestingly, that's where he oddly had a Jewish girlfriend at one time, so and he was genuinely Iranian German. His mother was Iranian and his father was German. So it was an interesting dynamic when he was going out with a Jewish girl. And he was kind of expiating some of that in his pitch. You can go see it. You will discover that's an interesting dynamic if you bring home your boyfriend to Purim and say, it's my boyfriend, he's German-Iranian. That goes down well.
That's a movie in itself.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think the movie's there, and that was a really interesting pitch. So we get people who are coming from a variety of angles and pitching really interesting stuff because they see stories. And look, Hollywood is interested in selling movies, and movies need good stories, and good stories need human characters at the center of it, interesting story arcs, conflict, and what's the Bible packed full of? All of that. And people will go and see it if you do it as a big blockbuster swords and sandals movie like Noah. People will go. They'll have different opinions on whether they think that particular movie's right or wrong, but they will go and see it. I equally think you can re-scope the human element into a number of different settings. You don't have to just retell these stories as if they, recreate them 3,000-4,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. You can tell them as if they're now.
Right. Do any particular concepts work well from in shorts? So with that shorter.
Films in only one place with one actor. No.
Monologues.
Monologues. Sci-fis are always going to. Sci-fis are easier to pitch when you're taking something which has a faith-based background. You can set the rules of the world, because one of the things that's quite difficult to set up, particularly to a post-Christendom audience, to a secular audience, is how are there any rules? What are the rules? Sci-fi, you can set your own rules up. You can set the world rules up quite quickly, so you can retell those stories. So those help, but they're expensive to make because sci-fi worlds are costly to build. So that works against it. Costume dramas tricky to do.
Right. Yes. So all the filmmakers in the audience are now changing their concepts to a sci-fi concept.
Yeah, but we're doing one of those this year, so they also have to think about that.
Right. Anyway. Thank you, Luke. And Tom, the next question is for you. Is there a particular concept that is easier to finance? Is it very closely related to market? Is it more, does financing come from a very strong personal vision? So what makes a concept most likely to be financed? And what are the concepts that are most likely to be financed?
Very interesting. From a concept perspective, I think you can break films down into genres, and those genres drive, what the concepts are of the film. Certainly, high concept films like A Loving the Bad Man or other films that deal with difficult issues or real issues are sometimes harder to finance unless you can tap into folks that want to finance it because they know that story is something that they think should be told. Right. So high concept films actually could turn out to be the ones that are easiest to finance if you can find the right investors. So Loving the Bad Man is an example of that, of a high concept film that on paper you might say that should be kind of difficult to finance because it's a very genre specific film with a high concept. But I was fortunate enough to find some folks that believed in the story, that thought it was a story that had to be told, that really wanted to do the film not just for commercial reasons but for the kingdom, and it turned out to be a film that we financed in a matter of months. A couple of months we financed that, made 3 or 4 phone calls, got the right people, and were able to finance it. I would say the bigger driver of what makes a film easy or hard to finance typically is around distribution and who the talent is. I mean, ultimately, investors are looking for a quick payback or a payback that's somewhat assured. And although that's a tricky word in the film business, having some assured financing come back to you, but ultimately, most of most investors want to see that that there's an acting crowd that is involved that's going to drive the marketing of the film, and that has an opportunity to either get a theatrical, and then theatrical is going to help drive some of the ancillary revenues as well. So it seems to me to be more about distribution and the talent in the film than it is the concept of the film, in terms of what makes something easier or hard to actually finance.
Right. Great, thank you. And just, would you give the members of the audience and our listeners and viewers maybe the top 3 points on how to put a pitch packet together for a potential investor?
So for a potential investor, I think you need to keep it pretty simple and to the point, and start out initially with why this film is differentiated. What's unique about this story? What is the emotional reaction that you think the audiences are actually going to vest into this film? So that's number one. Number two would be around, what's your business plan? You don't need a 30-page business plan, but you need a plan about how you're going to differentiate this film from a distribution perspective. What is your game plan? What's unique about the distribution of this film? As I said earlier, if it's a film that has a significant talent list behind it, then you're going to be one of the few films that actually gets a theatrical distribution. If it's not that type of a film, but you think it has a unique concept that can drive audiences in the church community, let's say, you need to really focus on that. So those are two significant ones. And then I think thirdly, I've found that this to be probably the most important thing. You need to demonstrate in that pitch why you and your team will be good stewards of that project, from both a character perspective as well as being around to stay the course, because films take a very long time to make. They take a very long time to market, and sometimes you're invested in that film emotionally and with your time for 3, 4, 5 years. And you don't want to be the kind of steward of a project like that that's sort of off to the next thing. You need to, demonstrate that you can stay with it and have the staying power and the perseverance to follow things through.
Right, great. Thank you. And Paul, the next question is for you. It's a two-part question, really. The first part is, are you ever serious?
Right. We'll find out in
and
part
the
two.
follow-up is, you have a great track record now in writing, not just in stand-up, as I explained earlier, but certainly in writing. How have you adapted your stand-up routine and your background in live comedy to the screen, in script writing? Have you changed the way, I realise it's another channel, but have you changed the way you communicate with humour once it comes to the screen?
Yeah, I guess they are very distinct forms of media, of course, and I think with stand-up comedy, you have such freedom, and it's just you on a stage, and you can say whatever you like. You can you can do jokes, one-liners, stories. You can try and change the world. You can do a message, whatever you want to do. Obviously, it's got to be funny first and foremost. That's what people have come for. I find particularly with the sort of anti-theistic streak in the comedy circuit, which is definitely there, that's more likely where you're going to hear preachiness than generally from anyone else. And actually, I find audiences often get a bit tired of that, and there is this idea that atheist comedy is quite big. But actually, I find that punters often, you see them walking out going, I just wanted to hear some jokes, really, so they just want to laugh, So there is that side of things on that. When it comes to writing, I think for TV, or started off with doing radio things as well for the BBC, but then more so with the TV, you obviously have more of a structure you need to be working with, of course, and writing a sitcom, I found when I started working on the sitcoms, you quickly realise that your lovely free-for-all attitude you have with stand-up comedy does not translate quite so easily. And so you get all these books out, and there's the 22 building blocks plan, and there's your arcs and all these different things you're sort of puzzling out, and it's a jigsaw. It is really, those are it's a craft, and it is graft. I think doing writing for whether it's film or for narrative comedy drama on TV. My background is mostly sitcom, where it's the episodic form, and you want to strike gold really and have a sitcom that you can imagine in America, of course, they're thinking we want to be able to plan 100 episodes. Over here, we're British, and so we go, we want to plan 6. Yeah, come on, we really go for it. So, and even that's being reined in now with budgets and finances, and you sometimes get a 3-episode series now or something, and you think, I've worked on these characters, and we're going to have 3 stories for them, and that's it until you can get renewed. So, there are just those ways of focusing on that. But the great thing about those stories is you can, I think, more so than perhaps stand-up comedy, you can get something about what you want to, a worldview. You can tell stories, great stories with, like we've been hearing about here, the characters that are reflecting perhaps our Christian values and our worldview. It doesn't have to be set 2,000 years ago. It can be set today, and you can be telling, a modern-day parable, really. And the great thing I find about particularly my background in comedy is it does follow a Christian mindset. You do have, if you have an evil character, they get their comeuppance, they get egg on their face by the end, and you have your main character who will go on who will learn by the end. Even in an out-and-out comedy, they will learn something and they will grow, and often the stupid character is the one who saves the day, and it's things like that. It's a leveling of the playing field, I think, which appeals to me as a Christian, I think, in that. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Now, you've also worked with the BBC and other organisations, and the BBC is well known for having a particular structure and a particular protocol. How would you suggest others navigate that protocol and structure?
It's a BBC. It's a love-hate relationship, I think, with the BBC. I adore it, and I've grown up watching Blackadder and Fawlty Towers and things, and now to be working on it myself is an absolute privilege. But then as soon as you get to meet, the management level, which seems to grow each year, it becomes so frustrating, and these hurdles you have to leap over. So I think you have to try and navigate that, and you send in your pitches and you work these things up. And we've been hearing about how you just, again, a similar thing, keep things brief and send things in. Often people want to, if there's a writer who wants to write up their pipe dream of a project, you can spend 2 years writing up, your perfect episode, send it in, and they go, well, no, we've got one of those. We don't need that. So often I find just a page or so of what the show's about, some writing samples. If they want more, they'll ask for more. Keep it punchy, keep it nice. And yeah, if you can navigate those levels of management, and then of course by the time they make a decision, the management's changed and someone comes in and wants a clean sweep, and then you've got to start again. But it's a bit like that. But the great thing is that, as we've been hearing more and more so, you can make your own things now. You can upload things to YouTube. You can film yourself on your phone even, and often it's better quality than things were 10 years ago on TV even. So that is great. If you're that sort of person who can just film something yourself. The Office was made not from a pilot script as such, but Ricky Gervais had filmed himself as David Brent, and he sent that in, and the producers instantly got it because they could see it on the screen and went, oh, brilliant, you've done the work for us. And in this world where money seems to be ever tighter, 2 years ago I'd be paid a bit of money to work up a script to see if they like the idea of the script. Now the BBC is saying, well, actually, you need to do that on your own time, on your own terms, we won't pay you for that pilot script now. If we like it, then we'll pay you for more. So more and more, I think it's up to us to create, put it out there, and if they like it, they'll go for it.
Right. Thank you. Andrew, the penultimate question is for you, and then Stephen, I'd like to come back to you to finish, and then we'll fill some questions from the floor. You're probably in the closest position to most of our audience at home, and also our audience members here. What advice would you have? And if I may call you the guerrilla filmmaker. So you've done an awful lot with an awful little, and you've done very well. You've told a story, a good story, very well on a tight budget. What advice would you have to somebody coming up in the industry as well?
Yeah, how to answer that in a sentence. In fact,
the book is coming out next year, isn't it?
Actually, I think you answered the question yourself, actually, by saying what I've done is I've done an awful lot. And I think the mistake people make is to think that you can pick up a camera and be a genius. That there's always an exception to prove the rule. But if you want to be good, you put the sweat and tears into your work over years. I've been in the creative industries for 20 years. So that the notion of the first feature film is, it works for marketing, but the reality is that's not true. My first film was when I was 18, and it's terrible. And if you search online, some cruel friend has put it online for all of you to watch. But it's 20 years of a portfolio of experiences, and I think this is the reality of most people working in the creative industries. Don't expect a structured work process where it exists in technicians' roles to a smaller extent, so you can enter the industry as a camera trainee, then you can become a second assistant camera, first assistant camera, camera operator, or DOP. There's that sort of structure. But the reality is you get what you can when you can. So in my portfolio career, I have been a teacher in secondary school, further education. I've written a degree course. I've taught in a university. I've set up from scratch an educational youth training organization, which really was, if you want to know, the groundwork of where I've come to make my first feature film. I've actually already produced 12 feature films with young people, and I've directed 6 of those over a period of 10 years. And you learn a lot through that process. I made my first short film, there's terrible speech marks around it, when I was 28 in the year 2000. It was starring Brian Blessed, David Baddiel, and for those who love comedy from the 80s, Phil Cool. And it was nominated for an award. We toured various different festivals. It took me 2 years to raise £25,000. There's a whole process there in itself of how do you get money, which I wish I could answer in a sentence. But the pitch, there you go. Actually, just in those terms, if you're interested in being a media professional, you are in control. And if you're not, well, then don't be surprised if you're on that sort of lottery list of to other people's tastes and expectations. And don't get me wrong, I think it's important. I love what the pitch is doing. Please do apply to that. But the reality is either you are a director or you're not. You are a writer or you're not. And that's something that has to grow and develop. And over time, all of a sudden you realize, oh, actually, I'm not pretend anymore. I actually am a director or a writer or a producer. That might seem a little bit strange and a little bit it might not be very clear, but again, if people have any questions, I'm happy to speak to people individually. But my point was this, was that in that portfolio of career, all those experiences add up. That they grow to a place where actually then what is the advice to making that first short film? You make 100 films before that. And having directed this first short film, which wasn't my first short film, I'd produced plays in the theatre in Liverpool and the Bolton Octagon and the Everyman Theatre. I'd then trained myself in film production. I'd worked for a production company. I'd made a glut of short films, and then I made my first short film. And I thought, you know what? This is a good short film. It's been nominated for an award. I've made it. People will realize what a genius I am and give me work. And I was shortlisted by a company in Manchester, quite a successful television production company, to direct a TV series. And I was delighted. I got to meet Paul Abbott, quite a famous writer in the UK, Nicola Schindler, a producer at Red. And Nicola, she said, Andrew, we really like what you've done, and we'd love to see another one. And my heart sank. I thought, but isn't that enough? I've just made a short film. You want to see another one? But actually, now it doesn't surprise me because it's about trust. Okay, if I'm producing a television program for the BBC, we're talking perhaps £500,000 for an hour. I don't know what the rates are nowadays, but it's probably much less than that. But the reality is that we're dealing with a large amount of money. And there you are as this wet behind the ears director, expecting the world to love you and say you're incredible. And that relationship is one that's built over time, and it's one of trust. So, and I know a massive amount more than when I directed my first short film, which was my 100th, because I've done the legwork. I've produced 12 feature films and directed 6, and then I directed, on a very low budget, my first feature film with funding from the United States. Thank you. God bless America. No, in actual, I think that sense that we are a global community and the idea of Christians working together is important. And thankfully, Vision Video and Bill Curtis at Vision Video was very kind to support a British film and get that made. So there we go. In one sentence, put the effort in, work hard, and then in a few years you'll be able to make your first film.
Right. So pay your dues.
Yeah.
Pay your dues. Right. Stephen, if I may just come back to you before we feel to the floor. You've been very open and candid about the temptations and pitfalls, particularly in your early life when you started out as an actor. What advice would you give to somebody who is starting out as well in their career? Maybe not just in acting, but in the industry that you know so well.
Depends on what you mean, temptations, but I want to just reverberate something this gentleman was talking about as well, because he brought two thoughts to me that are actually relevant to my answer, which is, I always say to anybody that wants to pursue creating content, whatever it is, that is faith-based, do it because you really love it. Really allow, we should examine ourselves in that respect and do the best we can to be sure that it's a calling, it's authentic, and that we really have a great zeal and passion to want to be involved with it. Because in my opinion, if that element isn't there, it's really not worth the pursuit. And then a guy I met many years ago named Michael J. Fox told me these words. He said, "Steve, remember, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success." So I hear you loud and clear. So perseverance is also, don't give up, be doing it for the right reasons, and all of that. But I think particularly now with this quantum leaping and trending that we see happening in the Christian film and content providing industry, when I speak to different folks, even on a ministry level or in an evangelistic way, I always like to say to people that you cannot give away something that you do not have. So relevant to what the heart and the hope of Jesus is, which is for his Spirit to operate through us in order to allow for his gospel to be communicated and salvation and all of that. If we're not on a daily basis going through the process as individuals that we need to in order for that function to occur, then kind of, sort of, pretty much, yeah, you're wasting your time. So my only advice to people, particularly young people, is just be sure that in your own personal walk, you're not allowing for whatever your perception is as far as your motivations. If you're really authentically prioritizing your relationship with Jesus, then everything else should fall into place. So that would be the advice I give to anybody that's trying to get involved with this. Is just like anything else, just if you're making your own personal individual walk the priority and the thing that will not allow what your hope is to come true unless you are walking that walk and talking that talk as best you can.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, panel. Each and every one of you will be very helpful. And, does anyone in the audience have a question for any member of the panel? And if you do, if you'd like to come to the microphone.
Just a comment, and what Luke was jokingly saying is that I think the other problem is that people think they can do everything themselves. This is something that's about teamwork. Filmmaking is not one person. I had 150 people involved with my feature film, and that was a small film. So, you know, cooperation is very important. Sorry.
I just have a question for Stephen from something you said yesterday. You said about using the colleges for the technical side of a film. Do you remember? Can you hear? Yes. That you said yesterday that you advised that you could use the colleges to really get the technical. You get
Just
the
repeat it for me.
Sure.
You said yesterday that it's a good idea to use, if you have a story concept, so work through colleges to use their tech departments and their facilities.
Making a movie. But I want to know where would the finance come from for that?
Well, right. I got to share with some folks yesterday, and I was saying that as part of a motivation that I have, which is to work with young people, I have explored and twice now successfully with a music video and a short film. Both of them were Christian. I was able to go to even secular colleges that had relatively successful film school divisions for the students and say to them, hey, here's an opportunity I hope that you will see is kind of neat and interesting for your students to participate in. To answer your question, if you can identify an institution with a film school with the right equipment, you know, that is operating at a level of excellence that you need, you almost don't need financing. I'm sorry? What'd you say?
Actors.
Oh, well, there's a couple of ways to do that too. Because for the most part, when it comes to doing independent feature films now, like in America, you have the Screen Actors Guild, and then within the Screen Actors Guild, you have different levels of the kinds of movies you make based on the budgetary levels. So there's literally, I think there's one classification called ultra low budget, which is like it's only made for like less than $10,000, and that's what they're using to pay everybody that's involved. And I don't have all the specifics about that.
$100 a day is what the actors get paid.
Yeah. $100 a day is what the actors would get paid on that, and that's disgusting. I think it's way too much. But I think that this idea is something that either the students can be actors in it as well, depending on the script. Once you do go through that process and you actually engage the school and you've identified who that director of photography is going to be and, you know, what students will be involved in the technical aspects of it, then once you have that identified, then you can start considering on the acting side and all that other stuff which way you would want to go. Because if I'm an actor and I live in London and somebody were to approach me and say, here's an opportunity for you where you're not going to get paid anything, or if I need to try to raise a little funding to get you involved, which happens all the time now in independent filmmaking. There are films that are made for little to no money, and then they go and actually find people just to raise X amount of dollars for that one particular actor, because that'll enhance the project, and obviously that actor and their ability is correct for that role. But that's kind of something you have to figure out for yourself. But I think the important part is if you can get a school to provide all of the cameras and manpower, you're off to a pretty good start.
Great, thank you.
How would you define a Christian theme?
So I have a really interesting comment, which is my daughter just finished film school, and one of her assignments was to go back and watch On the Waterfront. Familiar with that film? Made in the 1950s, probably one of the top 10 films of all time. Marlon Brando, set place in East New York, down on the docks during the 50s. And if when that film came out in the 1950s, it wasn't a faith-based film. But when you watch it today, and had that movie been released today, it definitely would have been a faith-based Christian film. So it's amazing how the market has totally shifted. And I think this whole genre of Christian films is a reaction to how far the pendulum has swung in Hollywood with respect to sort of violence and some of the films that are out there today. So for me, personally, a Christian film is a film that has a lot of values that are consistent to the Christian faith. It doesn't necessarily need to be preachy or have a religious figure in it or be a historical biblical film. I would actually put a film like The Blind Side, which was an incredibly successful secular film, almost in the concept of a Christian film, because who the main character was and what that main character's fundamental belief drove her to do in bringing that young man into her home. Had she not had that Christian faith, that never would have happened. So, to me, the concept of a Christian film is a very, very broad definition, and you know, that's what's exciting for me, because I think there's a huge market for those kinds of films, and we can see this wave building in the marketplace today.
Pretty much, I would echo the same thing as Tom, and it's a difficult question to answer if you think about it, because cinema is the most powerful, in my opinion, mechanism for communicating emotion. And with that in mind, you know, you could have one film like Passion of the Christ that does what it does and says what it says, and then you can have some other film that is a full-blown secular movie with elements and storylines that, as Christians, we would probably never want to be exposed to. But then somewhere in that story is this one moment that, you know, communicates Jesus Christ better than, you know, many, many, many other things. So it's kind of difficult to answer in that respect. And for me personally, I now, having been walking this walk for 11, almost 12 years now, and having worked in the film business with a lot of folks that were pretty creepy people, I think you know what I'm trying to say. For me, echoing what Tom said, I have films and projects in development right now, like the one in Poland, for example. It will be a full-on, straight-up action drama. And very subtly woven into it will be this communication of faith and God and things like that, and even Jesus, but very subtly. Because I happen to believe that in our world today, the revelation of God's hand in our lives is something that people are relating to more and more and more now without being conscious of it. So that's an interesting path of connectivity. I think that's very interesting. But for me, again, I believe that the Christian film is the film that is unafraid to message Jesus. That's kind of an oxymoron, what I just said. It kind of checks what I just said, but there's a difference in my mind between faith-based and Christian. There are faith-based, Christian, family-friendly, morally responsible. There's 101 ways to skin the cat, so to speak. And in the development of projects that I'm putting together now, I like to say to the investors, you know, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's what's more important in my mind in the creation of Christian content. It's not what we say, it's how we say it that will allow for the mainstream and the secular world to embrace it and absorb it and receive it. So I'm just excited to start the process of creating my own library, so to speak, of that type of messaging. And I can tell you right now, these cameras are rolling. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to take risks. This film, Noah, that just came out, I was the only Christian actor that walked the red carpet and, went to the premiere at the Ziegfeld in New York, and there was everybody. And basically, in all the interviews I did on the red carpet, I said, but isn't it cool we can, have the conversation? I mean, at the very least, isn't it interesting that God allowed for this to happen so we could talk about the Bible and the faith and things like that? I'm just more, I get more excited within the culture and society to look for those windows of opportunity than the ones that are more structured and premeditated. I think it's more fun and interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Sorry, excuse me. One last question, but we'll come back.
I turned away from Islam in my teens. I'm a Christian now, and at the moment, in any time in history, you've got a great exodus of people from Islam that are turning away from Islam around the world, and yet this is unheard of in the Islamic communities because it's a close-knit community. There's this understanding that millions are turning to Islam, whereas it's the other way around. And I think that Hollywood and people like yourself have a responsibility to show stories of people that have turned away from Islam. This is a picture as well, by the way. So if you want to speak to me afterwards, you can. So God had told me 22 years ago to do a book, which is now being done. It's called, I'm calling it Apostate, which is short and simple and hard hitting. And I feel are Christians, like yourselves and Hollywood, afraid to take on an issue when it's to do with Islam, of upsetting the Arab states because of oil or whatever? I don't know. That's my question, and I feel that it's important that you people take this on board. I think until the Islamic community is aware that there is a great exodus of people leaving Islam, you're not going to be able to move into that community, because what you're having at the moment is that there are people out there who actually don't accept Islam, but they still live under the umbrella of Islam because they're afraid to lose their identity, their culture, whatever. And I think it's those people that we need to address, and Hollywood and people like yourselves are more able to, to do that.
I'd like to just suggest first and foremost that we will be around, sir, when this is done, so we can have that conversation with you as well. I don't know, scheduling-wise, how long we can sit here and address that. And for me personally, much more important than making films that express what you just talked about. I'm actually going to be in the Philippines in 4 days with Ravi Zacharias. I don't know if you know who that is, but he debates Muslim clerics quite often, and so my understanding of what you're saying is a little bit more involved, more so for me on a ministry level than on a content creation or film creation level. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think that there should be, as best we can, a push or a focus in the direction of putting a light on the truth about Islam. And in my ministry, I get to say this quite often. I'll say to people that born-again Christianity is the fastest free-willed faith that is growing on the planet. And people will say, no. The Muslim faith is so statistically and technically by the numbers, the Muslim faith grows faster than any other faith, but it's forced upon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the part that people don't understand. Right. That's what he means by free. That's exactly my point. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm saying, and that should be expressed as best we can in as many ways as we can, particularly through film. But did anybody else want to comment on that? Because we can be around afterwards, et cetera, et cetera.
To me, like a great opportunity, perhaps for a short story, initially about an individual who's basically trying to break away. What we all have to understand more than anything, Hollywood's all about making money, and if they think they can make money with a picture like that by getting half a million or more converts like that to see the film, I think they would probably jump on that opportunity. But I think you have to develop the marketplace.
There is a reality, though, that Van Gogh was killed because he made a short video dealing with these issues as well. So there is a risk.
That would be Theo, not Vincent.
Yes.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I know you have some more
That's
questions, but we must finish here. Please thank our panel for their input. It's much appreciated. Thank you.